So, getting to be back here with Shannon, and we're having some pre-conversation before the recorded conversation, but we've been discussing this idea of separation and why it even matters for us to have that conversation. And there's a multitude of reasons, but I really wanted to talk with Shannon about this in a way that we could share the conversation, because I think it's so important to just the journey of being a human being, obviously, but also because most people are out there seeking something that's going to heal them or heal their relationships or just fix their life. I mean, I just don't know any human being in my space or out in the world that isn't currently working on how can I make my life better. I mean, I think everybody is of the mind that no matter where they are in their life, it could be better, or they have an idea that they'd like something better. So thinking about that, talking about separation, we were discussing a concept that honestly I was engaging with, I guess is the right word, from someone that I read a long time ago, which is Ernest Holmes. And he was talking about the union, within all of us, this inevitable union that we are, this oneness that we are, one with God. And we are these iterations of God, these expressions of God here. But that man has done a number on himself by identifying all of the parts of himself. And from what I took from the reading and the understanding of it, just reintroducing it to myself, was it's what we do in order to understand God. I mean, yes, we're doing it because we want to understand ourselves, but it's like we need to pick it apart and we need to call it certain things. And one of the examples he gave was how that man is the one who has labeled the mind and given it these different, subconscious, conscious aspects in an effort to understand himself better. And I don't know, something about that. I was just sitting with it. I'm thinking, yeah, we're doing this to ourselves. All of this separation that we've created just in language alone, in an attempt to better understand ourselves. And so it just got me thinking about a ton of different things, which I know we'll get to have conversation about, but I really wanted to hear your take on just that, and anything else that was sparked because of that conversation.
Yeah. So when, like, you and I were chatting the other day, we were talking about like Moses in the Bible and not being able to go into the promised land, right? Like Moses was promised, and it was like, get the people out, and he got through like all of those steps, but he didn't get to see the promised land, right? And it was like, and I was thinking about that after we were talking about it, like, I mean, my brain just went like 1,000 miles an hour in all kinds of different ways. And it was just like, because he was holding this iteration of himself, this concept of himself, as like he's the one who gets them out. Well, he did that. That was done. And then it was like, could he just not change that iteration? Like, you know what I mean? Like he attached to this one part of himself. Like he attached to this one thing as his identity. And then it was like, he could not let that thing go. You know what I mean? In order to be able to hold this new thing that they were coming into. So he didn't get to live to see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, isn't that, and I was just thinking about that. Like, I was thinking about that, like how we do that in so many different areas. Like, I think I've shared this maybe with you before, but I love to write. And I had like a brilliant idea for like a piece of fiction that just came to me, right, magically. And it was a brilliant idea, but there was part of me that was like, wow, this is like a really big story. And I don't know if I'm qualified to tell this, all the things that we tell ourselves, these kinds of like stories that I was holding on to about myself. And so I didn't write it. And a few years later, I saw it on the screen as a movie. And I mean, several years later, obviously, this idea pretty much exactly the idea that I had received was playing out on a movie. And I remember reading a book called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, the writer, the Eat, Pray, Love, whatever, all this stuff. And she was talking about how the divine gives us an idea, like the spark, but if we don't do anything with it, that divine stuff is going out. And I was thinking about like the scripture, like my word doesn't return void, like, right, like where it goes out, like something is coming from this thing. And if it can't come from you because of the concept that you hold of yourself, it's still going to come.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And I was just thinking, so in the context of separation, it's like we keep ourselves separate from the divine. Yep. Like we are the ones, because of our concept of ourselves, that keeps us separate.
Yep.
Like, and it's fascinating to me.
Yeah, because we're saying this before we got into the conversation, and I mentioned listening to people discuss the way a human expresses. And it's like, they use words like, well, your ego does this, and then you have your higher self that does this, and it's like, and you have your soul, and you have your spirit, and you have this part of you, and you have that part of you, all in an effort to understand. To me, it feels like the way that whenever you're like really like enmeshed in something that's going on in your life, and the only way sometimes to see what is actually going on is you have to like pull yourself away, pull yourself out of it so you can see it for what it really is. But in our humanity, we have done that in an effort to understand God. We have pulled ourselves away from God so we can look at it and examine it and dissect it, and then understand all the parts and find words and meaning and identity. And then once we understand it, then it feels safe to us to decide whether or not we're going to then let ourselves have a relationship. But by that time, we have trained ourselves that we are separate, that it doesn't feel right for us to go and adopt it now as what we are, because when we look at it, we go, it's magnificent and it's grand and it's all perfection and it's all love and it is light and good and, all of these things. And I'm not that. And the only reason we think that is because we pulled ourselves away from it.
Right.
And decided that it was not us.
Right.
And I think in just like, it was such a little flash of like information that came in that, like returning to the reading. And I was just like having all of these thoughts. And I think in the conversation that I sent to you later on was how it always comes back around to this same idea. We're always coming back around to the fact that it is just one thing, it isn't all these pieces and parts. We do that because we're trying to understand it.
Yep.
We use those those terms and that language to try to understand, but God is just this one thing that is dynamic and has all of this expression. And I said to you, I think in the message, it was like, just remind me if I ever try to do something else or talk about something else, kick me in the pants and be like, Jody, you know better. It's this one thing over here. And it has always been this thing. And you keep coming back to this. And I said, we're going to be like the legitimate Israelites walking around this mountain over and over and over again, never getting into the promised land because we're so addicted to trying to make meaning of everything that's happening in our human experience.
Yep. Yep. It's a distraction. And then calling out the distractions becomes the distraction. Yes. Right. Right. I mean, that's the reality. Like I had a friend send me like a picture of something on Instagram about, I don't know, it was human design or something. And it was like, oh, a manifester. It's like, we just need to stop thinking about all the ways that other people are telling us that we can't have what we want or be what we want. And we need to start examining all of the ways we believe we can't have what we want. And I'm like, no, Nope.
No,
No, we missed the mark. We missed the mark right there because that's a distraction. It's just another distraction. And like, we need to, again, we just need to get clear about what we want. We need to get clear about our desires. Like our desires kind of point us back to that God self within us. When we take our eyes outside onto the external world, I'm like focusing in on those desires points us back inward. Like it, and we need to get to that point where we go back inward instead of like, let me dissect this thing again, pull it apart in 50 different ways, stand back from it, because then we're standing back from God. Like we're doing that, we're standing back. And then again, we're placing God outside of ourselves. We're placing that power, everything that comes with that outside of ourselves again. Yes. And that to me is when we also get into this, this personification of God as well, right? Then we start putting all of these very human, very nonsensical traits onto God, which really just causes further separation. That's all. Just more separation at that point.
I heard someone say one time that when we're talking about God, if we're still seeking nearness, to be near God, then we are still talking about separation, because there isn't this God self, human self. There isn't, it is really just this one thing, but we have such a difficult time accepting that that is true, because in us, we have magnified every perceived flaw. And it's in the way we talk about ourselves too, because this is accepted. Yeah. You can't go to a religious service without someone very distinctly declaring, I am a wretched sinner, but God is love.
Yeah. And I am unworthy. I am unworthy. But yeah, I am unfaithful, but God is faithful. I am, yes.
Yes.
The litany. Yes.
Right. And so this is a massive conflict, because then we have to bring people, we're trying to help people come out of their separation, which is biblical, if you want to talk about it from that perspective, but just in wholeness, like it is what you said this earlier when you were talking about the way that we fracture our own minds, dissecting ourselves, pulling ourselves apart to understand the hurt and the wound and the trauma and the this and the that. It fractures us even further, just trying to make it make sense.
Yeah, it's like, it's that concept of the mind or the meaning maker and just using it incorrectly. Again, I just feel like so much really comes down to that, like our conditioning and our society and just kind of the way that we're taught to use our mind, or really just not taught to use it at all, right? And so what we experience and what we've seen other people do and everything is to go and attempt to make sense of things. That's what humans do. We make sense of things. We make meaning out of things. That's a distraction for the most part. Like that God self within you already knows, doesn't care. We're moving right along now. But it's like in that humanity, we want to go backwards and make sense. But it's like that mind, that power of our mind is made for focusing on the desires and what we want, and on feeling that outcome, and on that is the correct use of the meaning maker. And I'm like, and instead we're back here, using it incorrectly. It's, it's like giving a toddler to a hammer, or a hammer to a toddler. Like it's just, the tool is in the wrong hands. It's not being used properly, for sure.
Right. Today I was in my prayer time, like my regular prayer treatment, and I was having this whole process happening while I'm like in my meditative space. And I was taking myself through this rhetoric really in my mind of going, gosh, I am not this body, and I can say that and have a concept of that, but really letting that settle down into me and being like, I'm totally not this body. This body is here to serve my purpose and my will.
Yes.
And it is part of me in that it is the expression of my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But I am not my mind.
Right.
I am the thing that witnesses the mind.
Yes.
And my mind is manifesting my body. And I was just having a whole time of it sitting there going, holy cow, I really have got to get my bearings here on what's really going on in this moment.
Yep.
Because I don't think there is no value. And I just used a bunch of negative words in there. Anyway, I think it is potentially valuable to have an awareness of yourself in your physical body to the point that you can be present. But what I have found is that people become enamored with the knowing of the physical body, that becomes their God.
Yes. Yes.
Then that creates a boundary around people. And then they start having conflict in themselves, trying to grasp the limitlessness of God because they have encapsulated themselves in a limited form.
Yes.
And it's just like, I know it probably can feel like a lot to get your mind around, but the fact of the matter is, our body is just here to serve us. And it is just the 3D printing of our mind.
Mm-hmm.
Period. And people understand 3D printers because they're everywhere now. You put in the image, you program the image you want, and it prints it out 3-dimensionally. That's what your body is. It's the
Well, like everything else in your life.
Yes.
Just like exactly everything else in your life. It's your body. Your body is like that, but so is absolutely everything else in your life. Like I love you shared in one space that we have been in together, and you shared with everyone, and you said, I want you to take a look around at your life right now, every single thing in it, and pat yourself on the back because you've created it. Right? Like good, bad, or indifferent over here, you have created it. And it is like, and I think that that is wildly empowering, but there are people who are really freaked out by that concept, but it absolutely is just that. And like, and I think one of the reasons that people kind of freak out too is the body gives a great thing to focus on, right? It's another way to separate ourselves. And it's another thing that we get to dissect and label, right? Like, oh, I have this diagnosis. I have this thing wrong. I have this thing going on. And it's just another, that's more separation. That's more labeling. And so to me, anytime that we, like, I think labels can be a huge red flag. Like the moment I hear them now, I'm like, ooh, let's pause. Ooh, let's pause. That's a label. Let's pause. Let's pause and look at that. And let's just see what we need to do about that. Not, I don't care why it's there. I don't care. I'm way past all that. Like, let me try to figure out why I think this way and why do I believe this way? I don't care anymore why I think that way or why, you know what I mean? Like, it's a lie either way. And I'm not going to waste my time figuring out where that lie came from. Right? Like, I don't care. It's a lie. I need to instead start looking at how I can conceptualize truth.
Yes.
Like whatever that truth is within myself, like that needs to be accepted and believed by me instead of that lie.
Right.
Because that changes what I see on the outside. So in my physical body, in my physical reality, when I stop believing a lie and I start believing something true, things change in the physical world.
Yeah. Well, and from where I am and my vantage point right now is like getting so grounded in our humanity. It really does pull us apart from the true nature of what and who we are. Yeah. So that we have to almost dig ourselves out of these hideous holes of humanity because of the dysfunction. And then we need labels, we need diagnosis, we need medicine, we need band-aids. We need lots and lots of band-aids. And when we start to flip the script and the perspective, and we start looking at it from the right angle, we understand the body is a tool. It is here to serve us. That is it. And we can then begin to do the work through the part of us that is impacting the body, which is our mind. Our mind is 3D printing our body. So we need to program our mind correctly.
Yes.
And the part of us that's programming our mind is the only aspect of us that is true. It's not our ego. It's not any of the labels. It's just the law. It's just God. It's just the principle. And when we finally get to that place and go, that is what I am that.
Yep.
I am, then we can actually start to understand this entire game, this entire simulation, if you will. You know, we've gotten so enmeshed in it that we've been pulling ourselves apart inside of it, trying to figure out what everything is. And it's like, no, you're the projector of this. The real you is the projector of this. This is all fun.
Yep.
Or supposed to be, you know. And it's so interesting to me to just see how, what even today, when I was sitting there in that space and I'm going, God, I'm not my body. And I know that's true. My body is just receiving information that's being fed to it, and it is acting accordingly. And that information is coming from a mind that has either been inundated with information around it or is being disciplined by me.
Yes.
The real me. And I don't say that to say that my body is separate from me. My body is not separate from me. It is an expression of me.
That's it.
It's my
projection.
expression.
It's a projection of
Yes.
me.
Yes. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yes, because I keep talking about that. Like, I think that like I have a couple of friends that I talk about this with, and I swear they look at me like I have like 3 heads, but I'm like, it's all the concept. Your concept of you is what God is expressing through you. That's it. That's all. No more, no less. It's not, you know, and they're like, yeah, but God makes good things. I'm like, God says yes. God says yes. That's what happens.
Yeah. God is good.
Mm-hmm.
And everything God does is good.
Mm-hmm.
And everything we do believing we are not God doesn't last.
Right. And usually doesn't feel good. Doesn't feel good. You know, and I think that's what I think that is where that whole misconception happens, is that is, you're not understanding where that separation, where you have created that separation.
Yeah.
But it is there. You've created it. It's there.
Yeah.
So, and you're living according to that.
Yeah. And I understand people start to get into this conversation. The other day in our prayer circle, there was someone there that was talking about literally having the challenge of going, you know I am God, but I'm also not God. And I was like, wait, what? Well, I know I'm God, but I'm also not God. And I was like, oh, this is the thing that happens because of all of the hideousness of our world, where it's like, well, I can't claim that I'm God, because that's so egoic. And it's like, no, there are people that do it from a place of wanting to wield power. And it is a very undeveloped, immature perspective. Yes, it's all about power and control. But when you really know yourself as God, you begin to understand that you are the source of power. And that aside from that source of power, you don't even exist.
Yes.
So it has nothing to do with, I'm going to use the word egoic, which is another label that men like to make, but has nothing to do with an unconscious declaration. It has to do with understanding you cannot exist without it.
Right.
So there is no, I loved this years ago. I heard someone say, there is no God and, because people wanted to be like, well, there's God and the devil. There's good and evil. There's God and it's like, no, there's no God and. It is God. God isn't deficient. So God doesn't need something else on the other side, counterbalancing or anything. It's just all God.
Right.
And of course, that gets in people's heads. And it's like, those who think God is outside of them, then they're thinking of a being, they're thinking of this, person, whatever, it's personality. It's like, no, God is law. God is the law that upholds everything we are experiencing, creating, designing in our world right now. And the one that powers thought, the one that, directs the mind. That's it. And when we begin to understand God as that principle that is totally impersonal and is just upholding everything, and that then we can understand why God just says yes. The Bible says all of the promises of God are yes and amen in Christ.
Yep.
So there is no, maybe, there's something better.
We'll
There's no,
see. Wait
yeah.
for it.
Yeah, just wait for it. Those are all ideas we hold. And God just says, yes.
Yes.
If we say that's not for me, God says yes. And if we say that is for me, God says yes. If we say
Right.
I don't have enough, God says yes. If we say I'm sick, God says yes.
Right.
That's the law, the principle. And it is always working because it is all there is. I think the
Yes.
Bible also says that in him were all things created. And
Yes, it
nothing was
does.
created without him. There is no such thing as something that exists outside of God.
Right.
Absolutely nothing.
Right.
So the more that we can begin to understand that when we're talking about the way things work, we're talking about the principle, the law of life, there's nothing that can exist outside of that law.
Right.
It is only our error in trying to understand why things work the way they work.
Yes.
That we start to describe them, label them, pull them apart, and then we say we need to understand them because of all this nuance. And it's like, we're the ones creating the nuance,
Yes.
not God.
Right. We're the ones using the meaning maker incorrectly.
Right.
That's it. That's it. We're the ones using the tool incorrectly.
Right.
Yeah. And it becomes obvious, like in every single, if you don't have everything that you want, if you're not living the life you want, like, I think that's probably most of us. We can put our hand up about that. There are beliefs that we are holding on to about ourselves that are standing that is the separation that we perceive.
Yes.
That is keeping us from having, doing,
Yes.
being, etc.
Yeah. We have, to use another word of it, but we have crafted, woven together all of these stories and ideas about ourselves. That's what we have programmed into our mind, and our mind spits it out in a 3D print and goes, and there you are.
There it is.
And there's your life.
Yep.
And this is the life that belongs to you, And for me, when I began to just let myself soak in the concept of I and my Father are one. I remember the first time I wrote that down, and I wrote it in a journal, and it was like, I wrote it and then I was like, oh, I equals Father. That that is different than saying I and my Father are one. When I say the word I'm saying Father. Same.
Yes.
And people are like, what?
Be still and know that I am God.
Yes.
Right. And pay it, like, I mean, I say like I like to see, like, I was doing kind of like a moving meditation practice yesterday, and I was kind of saying some of these things to myself. Like, I was saying that I and my Father are one, I equal Father, like, be still and know that I am God. And it was so kind of interesting to listen to my mind, like, try to dissect that and figure it out and make meaning out of it. Just with all of the history of church and all of those things, all of that personality that is Shannon, that is this mask that is Shannon, trying to kind of figure out what that all looks like. Right. And I just laughed. I just kind of laughed. I just laughed at it. And I was like, okay. Like, and so then I just started in my practice. I just kind of kept going back to I am that I am. I am. Who do you say that I am? I am. Who do I say that I am? I am. Mm-hmm. Like, and and just kind of kept coming back to it because it is interesting to see all of the things just that arise when we sit with something that is like I equals father. Like
Yeah.
where does it all go? Where does your mind try to take you with it?
Yes.
I think it's a really cool kind of like window to see, like a place to kind of see where I still perceive separation
Mhm.
and how I still perceive it.
Yes. That's so good. Is making me think as you were saying that, the first time that I really let that kind of settle in me, like I'm saying, and I wrote it down, and I had to sit there for a minute and go, I I know I don't even know what this means to me right now. Again, the meaning maker, right? Like I had to try to figure. But this was like 2019 that this happened. The first time that I like wrote it and looked at it and I was like, oh, these are synonyms. They're the same thing. This is not like it's not like, whenever people go like me and my partner, like we're one,
Yeah.
it's like, well, you're actually not. In the way that you are demonstrating yourself in this experience, I see
Yeah.
your body, I see their body, like, but people always want to get real woo-woo about it and be like, yeah, but we're just one heart and one mind. It's like, okay, this is not that. This is not that. This is like, there is nothing else but that.
Yeah.
And you've said
That's the only truth. That's the law. That's the only truth.
that's it. That's all there is. Now I have this personality. I have this way of expressing that,
Mhm.
that I am.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I am that, that I am. And I'm just expressing through the story and the things that have been woven together to tell me like, and show up like this, or, be this way in the world. And I think I told you this one time I was sharing with someone some of this conversation and they were going through some things in their own life. And they were like, I just am worried that if I let myself move into that place of no personality, that I'm going to be dull and boring.
I thought that before. So I totally understand that person. Like what that was a fear of mine too. When I first started reading about that concept of like the personality is the mask. And when you take that off, what's left is God. You know what I mean? It kind of gave me like Christian flashbacks where they say that like, make me like Jesus, make me just like Jesus. And I'm like, oh my God, what a boring world. Not saying that Jesus was boring, but like, you know what I mean? Like I don't want everyone to be a carbon copy of the same person. I like had Stepford Wives kind of like scenes like flashing through my mind with that, and I'm like, oh my God. And because there are things about my personality that I enjoy about myself. Like I'm stupid sarcastic. I really like that about myself. And I'm like, what do you mean that's going to go away? Like what's going to happen? So I understand that person that you're talking to with that, because it is like a legit, because again, we're pulling things apart and we're dissecting instead of recognizing.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
another
and people get
distraction.
real attached. They get real attached to these parts of themselves. And it's
Yes.
like, oh, you want me to dissolve that? Well, I like that about
Yes.
me. It's like, yeah, but it's just a story that you made up about yourself. So
Yes.
what else is there? And in my experience, and you can tell me what your experience has been, because I know you've had some encounters yourself, but in my experience of coming to that part of me where it's like all of this human stuff just dissolves for a moment. And I can really stand in that place of just like, I have gained perspective
Mhm.
about what this all is. I don't feel, I obviously don't feel all the human things that I feel in that moment, but it brings a sense of confidence about me in this expression where there's no judgment about if I want to be sarcastic or if I want to be the funny person or the sad person or whatever. It's like it just wipes away all of the story attached to why that needs to stay there. And it's like, well, you can if you want to. It's
Yes.
your experience.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
yours to have. Make it whatever you want to make it. And I know some people will feel like, oh, Jody, that's not, no, this is God. God is the one that creates this. And I'm like, and so we're back to it.
Yes.
And so we're
Here
back
we
to
go again. Yes.
right. We're just gonna keep walking around this place And if we don't stop having this same conversation over and over again, we never get to go into the promised land, which was the transcendence of all of these rules and this material expression, needing to understand it, needing to, take care of it in a certain way, and all of this stuff, this obsession with the experience.
Yeah.
And getting into a place where you could have a better experience because you understand the origin of the experience.
Right. Right. Like Jesus even said, right? Like, apart from the Father, I can do nothing. He didn't say like, apart from the Father, I can't do it. Like, I can't do miracles, or I can't do whatever, but apart from the Father, I can do nothing.
Right.
I can do nothing. Right. I cease to be. Right. I can't breathe. I can't move. Apart from the Father, I can do nothing.
Yeah.
I and the Father are one. Like, do we see how this all goes together? Like, it is like creating, God is expressing your concept of yourself. And yeah, it is like that. If I've been into that place where the personality gets pulled off, I don't even, I guess, like, I don't even think about that. That just doesn't mean anything. Like, I know that sounds really like, ooh, like woo woo esoteric, whatever, but it's just like all of that fades away. And all I really feel is, the possibility that's there, the energy of that possibility, the energy of that, of creation kind of at your fingertips is really kind of how it feels like. And like, creation is finished, and I won't get started on all of that, but like, let that feeling of being able to, like, I hate this word, but like, manifest that creation already.
Yeah.
Like, that is the feeling that's there. That is, I feel everything that is available to me in that space.
Yes.
And it's amazing. And then my human part, as I'm talking about it right now, is like, yeah, why don't we spend more time in that space? Like, I'm over here. But really, I mean, it is that, like, in my moving meditation yesterday, it was like, when I got back to, after all the silly thoughts and the silly stuff, and really, and I just got into that I am space. And I know people talk about doing I am meditations and having some big whatever. And I don't do things like in some big experiential, ritualistic, I don't do anything like that. That's not who I am. That's not how I practice anything. But it was literally just doing some Pilates like exercises with this just kind of, thought that I was just kind of holding and playing with. That was just like, I am. And it was like, it went from a thought to like substance, like, for lack of a better, it just went from one thing to another. And it was like, it felt like the difference from being like stuck between, like, a rock and a hard place, like two objects, to being fluid in water.
Yes.
Like, it was like all the nonsense just dissolved. And it was like all of this, like, fluid, all of this possibility just opened up.
So good. And you saying that is spurring me into this place of us having the conversation around the mind and the body, because again, two things that are inseparable, they are one thing. The mind and the body, because the body is the expression of the mind, and they're together, they can't be separate. But some of the conversation you and I have been having, which I know is not ready to be fully had and fleshed out here yet, but I know we'll get to have it. I just, in my daily practice, in my just daily way of living, I am also assessing, which of course I would, but looking at, how are the ways that I have created this division, created this separation in the way that I talk, the way that I address parts of myself, the way that I address my life, the way that I look at my life. And like what you just said right now is exactly how I feel. It's like when you get into that place where all that other crap is dissolved and you really can sense this God thing in you, that is this law that is pulsing, moving through all of the inner spaces of the universe all the time. And it's like, man, there is really, in those places, it's like fear is gone. There is there's no extreme emotion one way or another, just a simple knowing of what I am and what is available. Like you said, possibility. And it is that thing of me going, and why don't we spend more time there? We just get bogged down in our experience and we become so engaged with it that it's like we lose ourselves.
Yes. Yes. It makes me think of that book, and you and I've talked about this book like a million times probably before, but the Brother Lawrence book, The Practice of the Presence of God. Mm-hmm. And of course I read that like in my very Christianese, whatever kind of days. And so had very different perspective on mm-hmm. it than I do now. But now I look at it and I'm like, that's the lack of separation, right? It is a practice of the presence of God mm-hmm. in our lives all the time, in mm-hmm. everything that we do, recognizing that I am in every single thing that we do, in mm-hmm. everything that happens, in every choice that we make, in every word that we say, in every breath that we take. We can always like just open our eyes to that I am.
Yes. I think one of the reasons that I've always felt like this conversation was so needed is especially in the health and wellness realm. I know you are pretty well versed in German New Medicine, and you and I had a conversation a while back. We did Perfectly Patterned, which is so great because I've been doing my meditative times of prayer, and what has naturally been coming through is literally me saying, as I'm moving through my very organic and dynamic prayer time, is like, I am perfectly patterned. I am patterned for perfection, because we are just this walking around pattern of things, you know? And it just so naturally came through, and I had to laugh when it happened because I was like, yeah, Shannon and I had this whole conversation, but we were having that conversation, which is this conversation of separation because of things that you had really just walked yourself through in German New Medicine, understanding it and the way that our body expresses what it does, because it is so fearfully and wonderfully made. Like it is just incredible what it can do. And you said to me at one point while we were talking, you're like, really, if you look at all the conflicts that are expressed through German New Medicine in a way to understand the body and what it's doing and what it's healing, or, you know, whatever, it's like, when you get to the root of all those conflicts, there's just one thing going on. And when you said that, I was just like, well, what is it?
What's the thing? What's the thing?
What is it, Shannon? Tell us. We need to know.
Yeah, it's just separation.
I know.
It's just separation. Like if we like, you know, self-devaluation, right? This putting down of self. Would we do that if we remember that we are God? No. Territorial conflicts. Would I get territorial if I remembered that I am God? You know what I mean? Nesting conflicts, death right conflicts.
Yes.
Name it. Separation from other people conflicts, separation conflicts themselves, like the real, like German New Medicine separation conflicts. It's all separation. And our body runs these, you know, biological processes based on, you know, how it's designed, how the body's designed, how the body is put together. But our perception of what that separation looks and feels like, again, labeled, for us, like, how do I perceive this thing that's happening, right? Because you can experience a conflict and it's a territorial conflict for you, right? And maybe I experience the same thing and it's a self-devaluation conflict, mm-hmm. right? So maybe we have two completely different physical symptoms. We can experience the exact same thing together at the exact same time. And maybe you pull out of that, you know, a territorial conflict, and I pull out that self-devaluation. So I'm getting pain in places and I'm getting all kinds of other things. And you've got something else going on. That it's both separation. It's both places where we perceived ourselves as separate from the power that is in us, from that life-giving force that is in us.
Yep. Simple.
That's it.
I know. It's amazing. And when you consider that, and then all of the ways as a human being, I have created and been very articulate in designing my separation,
Yeah.
in an effort to understand myself, in an effort to understand where I come from, what made me this way. We have become so contemplative that it's like we have made life so complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Or what we call life. It isn't even life, because life isn't that,
No, it's just a perception.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have been the architect of my own perception of separation, and wow, is it grand.
Yes.
I'm a really great architect, apparently,
Yes.
because wow, is it an amazing structure.
Yeah. It's what I really appreciated in my own experience, having those little flashes, those little sessions. I called them soul sessions, but it was like just a moment. If that's all we could manage to get out, again, it feels like separation, but to literally dissolve the entire story for a little while, long enough to have the right perspective and go, oh, I am creating all of this. I am making it, and I can make it be whatever I choose. Right. So why wouldn't I choose to make it be a story of oneness, a story of real power, not power grabbing,
right?
A story of understanding that relationship and that it could never, ever be dissolved. Could never be dissolved. The Bible says nothing can separate us from the love of God.
Right.
There's absolutely nothing. There's no height, no depth. There's no powers, angels. There's nothing.
Yep.
Nothing can separate us from it. And the love is the fulfillment of the law.
Yes.
So we cannot ever be separate from that thing. And yet we have done, man, we've written books. We have libraries filled with information attempting to explain the human condition.
Oh, I have a whole bunch on my shelf.
Me too.
Right now. I have a whole bunch.
Me too.
Yeah. And yes, like when I was sitting, like when I was in my little moving meditation, that the scripture of be still and know that I am God. It was just like, it's not be still and think that I am God. It's not, be still and feel that I am God. Mm-hmm. It's be still and know that I am God. And I'm like, that is the disillusion of the separation. You can't think your way out of that perceived separation. You can't feel your way out of that perceived separation. You know your way out of that perceived separation.
It's like, and I've used this before, I may have already said it earlier in this conversation, you and I have been talking for a while, so I don't know what landed here, but the way that you get into this place is, because some people be like, I don't know how to get to the place of knowing, like knowing that. And I'm like, well, could anyone convince you right now that the name you've had since birth is not your name? Like if they're like, no, that's not your name, just let you know that is a total lie. You've been misguided this whole time. You would be like, no, it's my name. I've seen my birth. Like it is my name. No one's going to shake you internally off of that thing. Now they could come make up an elaborate story and tell you that they know something about your past that you don't know or whatever, but it's going to be very difficult. They're going to have to go through a major process to try to break you down, to convince you that you don't know your own name.
Yeah.
So with the confidence and the clarity that you know your own name is the way that we discipline our mind into the knowing that I am God. Sometimes you have to use deductive reasoning at the beginning. You have to like deduce things and go, well, if this is this, and this is, there's a way because of our humanity, because of our, elaborate need to understand. We might have to unpeel a lot of things and like pull them back. But then once we can get into it and we can begin to like just practice that, like what you're doing in your prayer practice of saying that to yourself is you are retraining that mind program so that it spits out the expression of that truth.
Right.
And we have to do it.
Right.
That's the work that we're here to do.
That's the work. That's the work. That's it. Yeah. That's it. 100%. Because that is, to me, that's the only thing. Trying to convince yourself that lies are lies doesn't work. You have to show the truth against the lie over and over and over again, sometimes, right? Because I feel like the truth, I feel like we know the truth. I feel like, you know what I mean? We might fight the truth. And it's kind of classically a Jody thing to say is when somebody's like, I don't know. And you're like, you do know. You do know, right? Inside of us, we know. We know. You know what the truth is. So it's really just about holding that truth up over and over and over. And holding that truth up, to me, dissolves the lies.
Yes.
Like, it just dissolves the lies. Like, yeah, you may believe a lot of lies. Trust me, I have believed a lot of lies. I still believe a lot of lies right now, right? That's my perception. And that is what that is what I am absolutely creating right now. And I'm well aware of it. But holding the truth up over and over and over and over again is the thing that dissolves the lies. Mm-hmm. And so that's why, to me, that concept of reminding myself of that I am is it's the only thing. That's the only thing.
Yeah. Because
that's, I am without any of the stories, without any of the anything, any of the labels, right? Not like I am Shannon. Mm-mm. I am a mom. I am a wife. I am a this. I am. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Before I was this, I am. Right? Like,
yes.
That's
what Jesus said. And
right.
They just thought he was blaspheming.
Right.
And before Moses was,
I am. Before Moses was, I am. Right. And I mean, that's what it is. Like, before Shannon was, I am.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And it's like, be with that until that starts to feel real enough that you start to know that.
Yes. Yeah. This is the one question that I will often ask whenever we get into conversations like this with other people. And I'm saying, look, if you could grasp this truth and you begin to let it soak into you and saturate every part of you, what would stand against you in your life? What could you not have? What would tell you no in your life? Because that is what Jesus was attempting to express in his ministry, his teachings, and the things that have been recorded. And we won't get into all of those things that you and I think about that. But the fact of the matter is, he was here to bring these two things back together. He was here to bring heaven and earth back together. He was here to show there's just one thing.
When there's no separation, this is what it looks like when there's no separation. Right? Exactly. Yeah.
This is what's possible when there is no separation.
Right. Absolutely. Right down to the physical, right down to the physical body, right down to every piece of that. Yeah. This is what it looks like when there's no separation.
So good.
Yeah.
So good. So with that, we'll conclude this conversation, but there's lots more conversation to be had. So thanks for being willing to have this one with me, and we'll be back. We'll be back with more.